Long ago, among the towering mountains and crystal-clear lakes of medieval Switzerland, there lived a man whose courage would inspire generations. His name was William Tell. Whether every detail of his story is fact or legend remains uncertain. Yet for centuries, people have remembered his name as a symbol of freedom, bravery, and the determination to stand against tyranny. His tale begins in a land unlike any other. Imagine a country nestled among vast mountain ranges. Snow-covered peaks touch the clouds. Deep valleys stretched between forests of pine and fir. Rivers carved their way through the landscape, fed by glaciers older than memory. In the early morning, mist drifted across quiet lakes like silver silk. It was a beautiful land, but beauty alone could not protect its people. At the time, the Swiss valleys were under the control of powerful rulers from the Habsburg Empire. The governors appointed by these rulers demanded obedience. Taxes grew heavier, laws became stricter, and the voices of ordinary people were often ignored. Among the villagers, frustration slowly began to grow. Farmers worked hard yet struggled to provide for their families. Hunters found restrictions placed upon lands their ancestors had roamed freely. Merchants faced endless demands from distant authorities. The people longed for something many take for granted: freedom. It was during these troubled times that William Tell lived in the canton of Uri. Unlike kings or nobles, Tell was an ordinary man. He owned no castle. He commanded no army. He possessed no great fortune. Yet he was respected throughout the region, not because of wealth, but because of his character. William Tell was known as a skilled hunter. His knowledge of the mountains was unmatched. He could navigate narrow trails hidden among cliffs. He could read the weather by watching clouds drift across distant peaks. And most remarkably, he was said to be the finest marksman in all the Swiss valleys. Armed with his crossbow, Tell could strike targets at astonishing distances. Stories of his skill spread from village to village. Children listened with wide eyes as travelers described his accuracy. Some even claimed that no arrow he fired ever missed its mark. Yet William Tell was not known merely for his talent. He was admired because he treated others with kindness. He helped neighbors during harsh winters. He assisted travelers who became lost in the mountains. And he taught his son, Walter, the values he believed mattered most: honor, courage, and respect for others. The bond between William and Walter was strong. Whenever possible, father and son explored the valleys together. They fished beside mountain streams, walked beneath towering cliffs, and watched golden sunlight dance across the waters of Lake Lucerne. During these peaceful moments, William often spoke about freedom, not as a political idea, but as something deeply human. The freedom to live honestly, to care for one's family, to make choices without fear. Walter listened carefully. Though young, he understood his father's words. Little did either of them know that their lives would soon become part of history. Far away, a man named Hermann Gessler ruled as governor on behalf of the Habsburg authorities. Gessler was ambitious, proud, and determined to enforce his power. Unlike leaders who earned loyalty through wisdom, Gessler demanded obedience through fear. His soldiers patrolled the roads. His officials monitored the villages. Punishments were swift, and resistance was not tolerated. Many people feared him. Some even whispered his name only in private. But fear has a strange effect. The harder one tries to control others, the more resentment begins to grow. As months passed, tensions increased throughout the region. The people of Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden began discussing ways to protect their freedoms. Quiet conversations took place in farmhouses, in mountain cabins, beside campfires hidden deep within forests. Though they came from different villages, they shared a common dream, a future where they could govern themselves, a future free from oppression. Gessler sensed this growing unrest, and he decided to make an example of the people. One morning, in the town square of Altdorf, his soldiers erected a tall pole. At the top of the pole, they placed Gessler's hat. Then an announcement was made. Every citizen who passed through the square would be required to bow before the hat, not before a king, not before a law, but before a hat, a symbol of Gessler's authority. Many villagers were shocked. Some were angry, yet most complied. The risk of refusal seemed too great. One by one, they lowered their heads as they passed. The square became a place of silent humiliation, a daily reminder of the governor's power. Then came the day that William Tell entered Altdorf with his son. The streets were crowded. Merchants displayed their goods. Children played near fountains. Travelers moved between market stalls. At first, it seemed like any ordinary day. William and Walter walked calmly through the square, lost in conversation. Neither noticed the pole standing ahead. Neither paid attention to the governor's hat. As they continued walking, soldiers suddenly stepped into their path. "Stop," one shouted. The square fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward them. William looked around, confused. The soldier pointed toward the pole. "You passed without bowing." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some villagers recognized William Tell immediately. Others sensed that something dangerous was unfolding. Gessler's officials quickly informed the governor. When Hermann Gessler arrived, a cruel smile appeared on his face. At last, he had found someone he could use to send a message. The governor stared at William Tell. "You are the famous marksman," he said. "I have heard many stories about your skill." William remained calm. "I am a hunter," he replied. "Nothing more." But Gessler was already forming a plan. A terrible plan. One that would soon place both father and son in unimaginable danger. And one that would transform William Tell from a respected hunter into a legend that would echo across centuries. The town square of Altdorf had become silent. Only moments earlier, it had been filled with the sounds of merchants, travelers, and daily life. Now, every conversation had stopped. Every eye was fixed upon William Tell and his son. The towering mountains that surrounded the valley seemed to watch from afar. Even the wind felt still. Governor Hermann Gessler stood before the crowd, studying the famous hunter. A faint smile crossed his face. It was not a smile of kindness. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed power and who enjoyed reminding others of it. "You are said to be the greatest marksman in Switzerland," Gessler said loudly. His voice echoed across the square. Many villagers lowered their eyes. They sensed danger. William Tell remained calm. Years spent among the mountains had taught him patience. But deep inside, he could feel unease beginning to grow. Gessler slowly turned toward Walter. The boy stood beside his father, trying to appear brave. Though young, he understood that something terrible was unfolding. Then the governor revealed his cruel challenge. "If your skill is truly as great as people claim," Gessler announced, "you shall prove it." His soldiers stepped forward. One carried a bright red apple. The crowd immediately sensed what was coming. Whispers spread like ripples across a lake. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others silently prayed. Gessler pointed toward Walter. "The apple shall be placed upon the boy's head." A gasp swept through the square. Women covered their mouths. Men exchanged horrified glances. The child froze. For a moment, nobody spoke. The governor's next words felt colder than winter wind. "You will stand at a distance and shoot the apple from his head with a single bolt from your crossbow." The square fell completely silent. William Tell stared at the governor. Surely this was madness. One mistake, one tiny miscalculation, one unexpected gust of wind, and his own son could be killed. The challenge was impossible, cruel, unthinkable, yet Gessler's expression remained unchanged. The governor knew exactly what he was doing. If Tell refused, he would be punished. If he accepted, the entire town would witness his suffering. Either way, Gessler believed he would win. William slowly knelt beside Walter. The boy's face was pale. Fear flickered in his eyes. Yet there was courage there too. The courage of a child who trusted his father completely. William placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Their eyes met. For a moment, the noise of the world seemed to disappear. There was only a father and his son. Nothing else. "Do not move," William said softly. His voice remained steady. "No matter what happens." Walter nodded. "I trust you, Father." Those words struck William's heart more deeply than any blade ever could. The boy's faith was absolute. And that made the burden even heavier. The apple was carefully placed atop Walter's head. The child stood perfectly still. The bright fruit seemed impossibly small against the vastness of the square, against the weight of the moment, against the danger. William stepped backward, then farther, and farther still. The distance grew. Every step felt like a lifetime. When he finally stopped, he slowly lifted his crossbow. The crowd held its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The mountains themselves seemed silent. William looked toward his son. The apple rested upon Walter's head. Small, fragile, far away. His hands, normally steady as stone, felt heavier than ever before. He had hunted deer across mountain slopes. He had struck targets at impossible distances. He had faced storms, cliffs, and dangers beyond counting. Yet nothing compared to this moment. Because this time, failure carried an unimaginable cost. William closed his eyes briefly, not in fear, but in concentration. He listened to the wind. He felt the rhythm of his own breathing, the years of practice, the countless hours spent in forests and mountains. Every lesson, every experience, everything led to this single moment. Then he opened his eyes. The world narrowed. The crowd disappeared. The square vanished. There was only the target, only the apple, only the shot. Slowly, he drew the bowstring. The crossbow creaked softly. A deep silence settled over Altdorf. And then, William released. The bolt flew through the air, straight and true. For an instant, time itself seemed to stop. The crowd watched in frozen anticipation. The bolt struck. The apple exploded into two pieces. One half spun left. The other tumbled right. Walter remained unharmed. For a heartbeat, nobody reacted. The scene felt unreal. Impossible. Then cheers erupted across the square. People shouted with relief. Some laughed. Others wept openly. The impossible challenge had been overcome. The boy was safe. The legendary marksman had succeeded. Walter ran toward his father. William embraced him tightly. For a brief moment, nothing else mattered. The nightmare was over, or so it seemed, but Gessler had noticed something. Before taking the shot, William had quietly placed a second bolt inside his coat. The governor's eyes narrowed. His expression darkened. "Tell me," he demanded, "why did you carry two bolts?" The crowd fell silent once more. Everyone understood the danger of the question. William could have lied. He could have invented an excuse. He could have attempted to avoid the truth. But William Tell was not a man who hid behind deception. Slowly, he looked directly at the governor. His answer was calm, yet every word struck with the force of thunder. "If I had harmed my son with the first bolt..." He paused. The square became silent again. "The second would have been for you." Shock swept through the crowd. Even the soldiers seemed stunned. No one had ever spoken to Gessler with such fearless honesty. For a moment, the governor simply stared. His face turned pale with fury. The humiliation was unbearable. Before all these witnesses, William Tell had not only survived the challenge, he had openly defied him. The governor's rage exploded. "Arrest him." Soldiers rushed forward. Chains were brought. Walter cried out as his father was seized. Villagers protested. Some begged for mercy. Others shouted that the challenge had already been completed. But Gessler would not listen. His pride had been wounded, and wounded pride is often more dangerous than any weapon. William Tell was bound and taken away. The crowd watched helplessly as he disappeared beneath armed escort. Yet something had changed that day, something greater than anyone realized. The people had witnessed courage, not the courage of warriors on a battlefield, not the courage of kings commanding armies, but the courage of one ordinary man who refused to bow before injustice. And that courage would soon ignite a fire that no governor could control. For William Tell's story was far from over. The greatest chapter was still to come. A storm, a daring escape, and a confrontation that would alter the destiny of Switzerland forever. The chains around William Tell's wrists felt cold against his skin. As soldiers led him away from Altdorf, the sounds of the town slowly faded behind him. The cheers that had followed his incredible shot. the cries of concern from the villagers, the voice of his son. All of it disappeared into the distance. Only the steady footsteps of armed guards remained. Governor Gessler rode ahead, his anger still burning. The challenge had not gone as he intended. Instead of breaking William Tell, he had made him a hero. And heroes, Gessler knew, were dangerous. The governor had no intention of allowing Tell another chance to inspire the people. His prisoner would be taken across Lake Lucerne to a fortress where escape would be impossible. There, far from his family and friends, William Tell would disappear from public view. Or so Gessler believed. The journey began beneath gray skies. The waters of Lake Lucerne stretched like polished silver beneath the mountains. Towering cliffs rose from the shoreline. Snow-covered peaks stood watch over the valley. The landscape was breathtaking. Yet that day, a strange tension filled the air. Nature itself seemed restless. The soldiers escorted Tell aboard a boat. His hands remained bound. Several guards surrounded him. Nearby, Governor Gessler sat confidently, convinced that victory was finally within his grasp. The vessel pushed away from shore. At first, the crossing seemed uneventful. Gentle waves rocked the boat. Clouds drifted slowly overhead. The mountains reflected upon the still water. But as the journey continued, the weather began to change. Dark clouds gathered above the peaks. The wind strengthened. The calm surface of the lake grew restless. Experienced sailors exchanged uneasy glances. They recognized the signs. A storm was approaching, and in the mountains, storms could arrive with terrifying speed. Within minutes, the sky darkened. Powerful gusts swept across the water. Waves crashed against the sides of the vessel. Rain began to fall. The boat pitched violently. Several soldiers struggled to maintain their footing. Panic spread among the crew. One sailor shouted above the wind. Another pointed toward the distant shore. The situation was becoming dangerous. Then someone remembered a crucial fact. William Tell. Throughout the region, he was known not only as a marksman, but also as an expert navigator of mountain lakes. He understood their currents, their hidden dangers, their sudden storms. Even Gessler knew this. The governor faced an impossible choice. Keep Tell restrained and risk losing everyone aboard, or free the prisoner and trust him to guide the boat. The storm made the decision. A massive wave slammed against the vessel. The boat lurched violently. Several men nearly fell into the water. At last, Gessler gave the order. Release him. The guards hesitated, but they obeyed. The chains were removed. For the first time since his arrest, William Tell stood free. At least for the moment. Immediately, he took control. His movements were calm and precise. He issued instructions to the crew, adjusted the vessel's course, guided them through the chaos. The sailors followed his commands without question. Slowly, the boat moved toward safety, toward a narrow section of rocky shoreline. As they approached the coast, Tell saw an opportunity, a single chance. Perhaps the only one he would ever have. The boat drew close to a rocky ledge, a place now remembered in Swiss legend as Tellsplat. The waves crashed against the cliffs. Spray filled the air. Timing would be everything. At precisely the right moment, William Tell leaped. With extraordinary strength, he sprang from the boat onto the rocks. His feet struck solid ground. Then, using a powerful push, he shoved the vessel back into the lake. The sudden movement carried the boat away before anyone could stop him. The soldiers shouted in disbelief. Gessler screamed with rage. But it was too late. William Tell had escaped. The mountains that had always been his allies now welcomed him home. Within moments, he vanished among the cliffs and forests, like a shadow swallowed by the wilderness. The governor's fury knew no bounds. Tell had escaped once again. And now the entire region would hear of it. But William was not simply running. He understood that Gessler would never stop. As long as the governor remained in power, the people would continue to suffer. The time had come for a final confrontation. Using secret mountain paths known only to local hunters, Tell traveled ahead of Gessler's route. The governor, unaware of what awaited him, continued his journey over land. His escort moved through narrow valleys bordered by steep slopes. The path wound between forests and cliffs. It was the perfect place for an ambush. William Tell waited patiently, hidden among the trees, crossbow in hand, the same weapon that had saved his son, the same weapon that had become a symbol of resistance. Hours passed. Then at last he saw them, Gessler and his escort. The governor rode confidently, believing his authority remained unchallenged. He never saw the hunter waiting above. Never saw the figure hidden among the shadows. William took aim. This shot carried a different weight than the apple in Altdorf. It was not about survival. It was about ending tyranny, about protecting the people, about defending freedom. The crossbow bolt flew, straight, true, unstoppable. It struck its target. Gessler fell. The cruel governor who had ruled through fear was gone. News spread rapidly across the valleys, from village to village, across mountains and lakes. The people could scarcely believe it. The governor who had seemed untouchable had been defeated, and William Tell's name became a symbol of hope. Yet his greatest achievement was not the defeat of a tyrant. It was what happened afterward. Inspired by growing resistance, the Swiss communities began strengthening their alliances. The cantons united. Farmers, hunters, merchants, villagers, people from different regions joined together with a common purpose: to govern themselves, to defend their freedoms, to shape their own future. The struggle would continue for many years. History would take many turns. Battles would be fought. Generations would pass. But the spirit that emerged during those days endured. And at the heart of that spirit stood the legend of William Tell. Whether every detail happened exactly as the stories describe is a question historians continue to debate. Some believe the tale contains embellishments. Others see it as a mixture of history and folklore. Yet legends often survive not because every detail is proven. They survive because they express something true about the human spirit. William Tell reminds us that courage can be found in ordinary people, that one person can challenge injustice, that freedom is precious, and that fear loses its power when people refuse to surrender their principles. As the centuries passed, Switzerland changed. Villages became towns. Kingdoms rose and fell across Europe. The world transformed in countless ways, yet the story remained. Parents told it to their children. Teachers shared it with students. Travelers carried it across borders. Artists painted it. Writers celebrated it. And generation after generation remembered the hunter who stood against tyranny. Even today, if you visit the shores of Lake Lucerne, you will find places connected to his legend. Towering mountains still reflect upon the water. Morning mist still drifts across the lake. Ancient paths still wind through forests and valleys. The landscape remains much as it was centuries ago. And when the evening sun turns the peaks gold, it is easy to imagine the figure of a lone hunter standing among the mountains, crossbow in hand, eyes fixed upon the horizon, a man who became more than a man, a symbol, a legend. William Tell, the marksman who split an apple, the father who risked everything for his son, the hero who inspired a nation.